Stanford University.
Thank you, Howard, for that introduction that was really too kind. And thanks to all of you for coming, the graduates, the family, the friends, for joining us here this morning. Thank you also to the senior class presidents for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. It's truly an honor and a very humbling experience. Now, a common bond that all Class Day speakers have is that we realize that given our level of athleticism, this will be the only time in our life where we get to walk out onto a basketball court and receive applause. If you've ever been in my classes, you know that's especially true for me. Yeah, because if you've seen me throw, basketball was just not going to happen. So this morning I'd like to share with you a bit of advice and tell you a few stories. And of course, I hope that tomorrow Mayor Bloomberg gives you a truly memorable commencement address so that you remember at least one of the speeches you get this weekend. Now, I have fond memories of where you are now. I'd have to admit, being sleep-deprived, somewhat bleary-eyed, wondering what had happened the last few years of my life. And that goes for the students, too. Now, I'm sure the last few years have really been an amazing time. And part of that amazing time is thinking about the fact that you got a chance to learn new things. You got a chance to make new friendships and build relationships that will potentially last you a lifetime. It was also a time to ask questions, perhaps only to get some of those questions answered. It may have even been a time to falter or to fail, but ultimately to overcome, so that tomorrow you go out of here as graduates of this fine institution, Stanford University. Congratulations to you all. I'm very proud of you because I know what it took for you to get here. Now, with that said, I hope it was worth it, what you paid for it. I'm sure your parents hope it was worth it too. But I'm not talking about tuition. We really appreciate that. Feel free to keep sending checks if you like, but that's not the important thing. There's something far more valuable than the tuition you paid. It's your time. And what you need to understand is that if there's one piece of advice I would give you today, it's that your time is the only real currency you have in your life. You can choose to exchange that time for knowledge, as you've done for the past few years. We call that getting an education. You can choose to exchange your time for money. That's referred to as gainful employment. I hope you all experienced that at some point. I'm sure your parents hope you experience it too. Soon, maybe Monday. Yeah, I think it's the parents that are applauding at that one. You can also spend your time in the pursuit of enjoyment. We refer to that as entertainment. And now that you're finally graduating, you can actually spend some of your time getting some rest, and that elusive concept we know is sleep. But it's also possible to exchange your time for nothing at all. Now, you might ask, what about my family? What about my friends? What about my education? Don't they have value? Well, consider this. What are your family and friends if you don't take the time to enjoy their company, to make and share memories with them, to let them know what they really mean to you, and to show them that you love them? What you need to think about is your family and friends are deserving of your time and that they give their time to you. That's what gives it value. What's the value of your education if you don't actually use it to try to affect change in the world or potentially share it with others? What you have is time, and the most important choices you can make in your life are how you decide to spend that time. The humbling and scary part of it all is you don't even know how much of it you have. All you know is that it's finite. Now, I don't mean to get up here and sound morose all of a sudden on this otherwise sunny day and have everyone think, wow, that Class Day speaker is a real bummer. I wish I didn't go to that one. But the reason I tell you this is to remind you that the earth doesn't sit still even if you do, to instill in you a sense of urgency that there are real problems out there to solve. So when I was invited to give this talk, they told me I should tell you a little bit about my work, and I stress the word a little bit, so I'll just tell you a little bit about it. As computer scientists, we worry all the time about time. How long it takes for a program to run, how long it takes for a result to be calculated, how much time it takes for information to flow through a network. It's how we measure the efficiency of our systems, the efficacy of our algorithms. It matters. And although I've spent many years at Stanford, as Howard mentioned, if you include the student years, it's really sort of too many to add up. I did spend a little bit of time in industry as well, at a little company some of you may have heard of, called Google. Now, this is what Google actually looked like 15 years ago. Not all that different now, except a little testament to the fact that graduate students should not do graphic design as computer scientists. One thing you may notice, this was actually when it was google.stanford.edu. And one of the things it says up there, it might be hard to make out, but it says the index contains about 25 million documents. That's how many documents were being searched when you put in a query. So consider the fact that just 10 years later, that number of documents grew to over 20 billion. It grew by a factor of 1,000 in 10 years' time. So what you need to understand is you live in a time when change is not just a constant, change is accelerating. Here's another picture of Google, back in the day. This is actually a room in the computer science building at Gates Hall. If you see something up in the top corner that looks somewhat like Legos, that's because, in fact, it is Legos. When Larry Page and Sergey Brin were building the initial search engine, they ran out of bays to store all the hard drives for all the documents they were crawling on the web. So Larry, in an amazing feat of ingenuity, decided to build a box out of Legos. He put some fans in it, he put hard drives in it, and voila, there's the web in Legos. Now, there's a few things I gained an appreciation for while I was there that had to do with time. One of them was that if people have to wait more than half a second to get back a query result, that actually changes their information-seeking behavior and what kind of information they get. If you're building a system that has to encompass an entire planet where people are all searching for information simultaneously, the speed of light actually matters as to how you design that system. So let me give you a more concrete example. While I was there, some colleagues and I came up with a method to try to extract meaning from the web. And the idea was, how could we determine, for example, the phrase president of Stanford and John Hennessy, at least at this point in time, mean roughly the same thing? Well, if you want to do that, it requires a tremendous amount of computation to basically look over the entire web if you consider the millions of concepts that are out there that you want to find relations among. So how did we do this? What we did was we harnessed the power of 2,000 computers. So I can only show you 400 there. Try to multiply that mentally by 5. And then those 2,000 computers ran continuously for 20 days. So you do the math. You have 2,000 computers times 20 days. That's about 40,000 years. That's 100 years of computation time. So what if I told you you had to solve this problem, but you only had a single computer available to you? What would you do? What would be your best strategy? You might say, well, Mehran, what strategy can I have? I have a computer, I run the program, I see what happens, I have to wait 100 years, it probably won't finish during my lifetime. Well, in fact, you have a different strategy. There's this idea, this folk saying in computing called Moore's Law, and what Moore's Law says is that every 2 years, the speed of computers approximately doubles. Now, here's an interesting idea. Let's say we had our initial problem, we started running, now it takes us 100 years to solve. What if I do nothing for 2 years? The speed of computers doubles, and now I can run my program for 50 years, and my total time to solve the problem is 52 years. That's pretty neat. Can I do it again? Sure you can. Wait 4 years, computers get 4 times as fast, and you run your program for a quarter of the time, 25 years. Your total time to solve the problem now, 29 years. Do that again? Absolutely. At this point, you get to see the gears start turning and that faint smell of burnt plastic when the engineers in the audience really start thinking hard about a problem. You think, oh, Mehran, doesn't this mean that I have an objective function? I can take its derivative with respect to time, set it equal to 0, and find the optimal value of time I should wait? Yes, it does. It also means this is the only time in your life you will hear the phrase, take the derivative with respect to time, used in a commencement address. So you find that the optimal amount of time to wait is roughly 10 years. During that time, presumably, computers will get 32 times faster. and the entire program will only take 3 years to run, which means you now solve the problem in 13 years. You might think, wow, Mehran, that's great. You just took this problem and you reduced it by a factor of 7 or 8. I should do that. Well, that's great, except there's just one problem with this. The problem is that time that you wait, that time that you potentially waste, is time when you're counting on someone else to solve the problem for you. You're counting on someone else to make computers faster. You're counting on someone else to take care of this big problem because you couldn't solve it yourself or you chose not to solve it yourself. Well, what if no one else chose not to solve it? You would be waiting an awfully long time and the problem would never get solved. What you need to understand is that progress is not guaranteed to happen. Progress isn't something that just gets relegated to others to take care of. Progress only happens because dedicated individuals like you choose to confront the problems at their time and tackle them, even if they seem daunting, even if someone tells them it'll take 100 years to solve. Because if you don't do it, there's no guarantee that anyone else will. So I like to tell my students, computer science really isn't about programming at all. Computer science is about solving problems. We just happen to do it with computers. Now, in this particular case, we happen to solve the problem by harnessing the power of 2,000 computers. So we could take this problem that was 100 years of effort to compute and solve it in 20 days. Now think about the fact that part of life is about problem solving. We have real problems in the world: poverty, inequality, climate change, terrorism. These are problems your generation will have to deal with. They're not something that you can just expect will go away or that someone else will take care of. Because what if no one else does? You need to understand that by working together, you can tackle, make progress, and potentially solve problems. Problems that some people may even argue would take 100 years to make progress on or to solve. But to do that means accepting the challenge of taking on those problems now, to work together to make it happen. So look around you. What you find is that you're not alone. Perhaps it's not coincidence that there's roughly 2,000 of you sitting here today. What you need to remember is that when you leave this place, you don't just leave with a degree. You leave with a network of people, of colleagues, and perhaps most importantly, friends. People that you can count on in the future for lots of things, including getting together for football games. Now, another pointer I got in preparing this talk was sort of the notion of talk about what you know. That always makes it easier. So let me tell you about something I have a lot of experience with: failure. I mean, after all, I just spent the past few days giving 250 grades to some of you and your closest friends. I know something about failure. Too soon? But the failure I want to talk about is not yours. Trust me, you did just fine in CS 109. It's going to be okay. The failure I want to talk about is my own. You see, failure is one of those things we tend to stigmatize. Even in grades, the F has to be separated from all the other letters by an unused letter because it just can't be that close to them. At Stanford, we can't even call it an F. It's an NP. Did you fail a class? No, I just didn't pass. So let me tell you a story. When I was in high school, on the very first progress report I got, perhaps the only grade I remember in the whole time I was in high school was I got a D in acting class. Because evidently I have difficulty standing up in front of a room of people and telling a story. So when I got told that I was going to have the opportunity to give this talk, I thought, is it in a room? And they said, no, it's in a basketball arena. And I thought, oh, then it'll be okay. So I know what you're thinking. Mehran, really? You got a D in acting class? How did you get into Stanford? Well, you know how the admissions office likes to say that they never make mistakes? I don't think they said that my year. Now, in reality, it's that D that I got in acting class that was the impetus for being able to stand in front of you now. Because in pursuing your dream, sometimes you'll face uncertainty. Sometimes you'll face fear. Sometimes you'll even face failure, but those aren't the reasons to give up. You see, your character is not determined by whether or not you succeed or fail. Your character is determined by what you do in the face of that success or failure. Do you choose to do what's easy, Or do you choose to do what's necessary? Do you choose to do what's just profitable or what's profitably just? Those are the things that will really determine your character. Now, I'm not just going to get up here and tell you that you should dream big or that you should just pursue your dreams. Because realistically, if years from now you look back and you say, the only reason I didn't pursue my dreams was because someone at my graduation didn't tell me to pursue my dreams, then you need to have bigger dreams. You need to have dreams that compel you every day to get up and pursue them. Dreams that are your own and no one else's. When you think about dreaming big, it doesn't mean you're dreaming about changing the whole world or that you're pursuing fame or fortune. All dreaming big really means is that you plan on making an impact in someone's life other than your own. That's what you need to take away from it. And if you're afraid of failing, you're not alone. Trust me on that. It's all right to be afraid. It's all right to be unsure. Just don't let it make you timid and stop you from dreaming. Another alumnus of this university, David Packard, of Hewlett and Packard fame, once said, "Take risks. Ask big questions. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you're not reaching far enough." So let me tell you another story. I told you a while back that I was at Google, and when the opportunity came up to potentially come back to Stanford, it was tremendously exciting. So I went to talk to my parents about it, because even after all these years, I still seek out their advice. So there's my dad. I know, thanks. Naturally enough, he had a few questions for me. He started off by saying, "Mehran, are you unhappy at Google?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm very happy there. I get to work with a great group of colleagues on really interesting problems." He said, "Oh, that's interesting." So then he said, "Well, you work less at Stanford. Well, you have more time for other things." Now you realize, my father didn't say that because he wants his son to be a slacker. He said that because he's 89 years old and he understands very viscerally the impact and value of time. So I said, "No, Dad, actually at Stanford, I'll work even more and I'll work harder." He said, "Oh, interesting." So then sort of half-jokingly he asked, "Will Stanford pay you more?" "Really, Dad?" "No, they won't pay me more. And there's no stock options either. But I see the president and provost are here. Maybe we'll talk about that afterwards." So I said, "Okay, so tell me why you want to go." And the reason really boils down to one word: you. I said this would be an opportunity to be able to work with, to get to know, and teach in some small way a group of amazingly motivated and bright, energetic students, to help them perhaps in just a tiny way so that when they graduate, they might be able to have a bigger impact in the world. So my dad said, "That's why you need to go." And then he sort of smiled, and he said one more thing. "When you go out there, make sure to have fun doing it." So I took his advice on that. I took his advice to heart. And one of the ways I took his advice to heart was this little bag of candy that I bring to class and throw out to students in the audience. And again, I don't think I can get much further than the Board of Trustees. But the real reason for throwing that candy isn't just because it's fun. It is fun. But it breaks down the barrier between students and faculty. It makes you think a little bit more that it's not just about you coming here and us trying to fill vessels of knowledge, but really we're all just people in the pursuit of knowledge, and we learn from each other as we go along, and the more we can do to break down that barrier, the better we can do with it. Oh yeah, there's one other thing too. This. I mean, really, how many times in your life do you get to give a speech to a packed room of people using a lightsaber? Now, it turns out I'm going to turn this off because if I don't, you're not going to hear anything else I say. But I actually get to do that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 months out of the year, because it's fun. Now, with that said, in a more serious note, let me show you another picture. These are the cutest children in the world. Okay? That's actually been declared by a scientist, because I'm a computer scientist, and I just declared it. Now, one of the things about these children, why do I show you this picture other than every parent's irrational need to show strangers who aren't otherwise interested pictures of their children? I know it happens. It's okay. The reason why I show you this story is to tell you a story, or to show you this picture is to tell you a story. You see, Claire, who's up there, actually has something in common with you. She, too, is a graduate of Stanford. Just not Stanford University. She's a graduate of Stanford preschool 2 weeks ago. Now, she's 4 years old, and she hasn't quite learned how to read, but she's fascinated by superheroes, as are all the students at her preschool. And so the other day, she and her brother William are sitting at the breakfast table, and she turns to him in earnest and asks him a question. She says, "William, if you could have any superhero power, what would it be? Would it be flying? Or would it be strong like Hulk? Or would it be reading?" I thought, that's cute. She thinks reading is a superpower. And then I thought, reading is a superpower to a 4-year-old who doesn't know how to do it. Your education is a superpower. It's the power to potentially change the world with your mind. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating about that, think about the time in which you live. Smallpox has been eradicated, a man has walked on the moon, and you have access to a wide swath of all of human knowledge by typing a few keys at a keyboard. That's what's happened as a result of education building a foundation of knowledge that over time has been extended and built upon until people could tackle problems that seemed previously inconceivable or someone thought may have taken 100 years to solve. It's not that your education is done now. In reality, your education never really ends. But there's a bigger issue for you to consider. What makes a superhero isn't just a superpower. What makes a superhero is a choice. It's a choice for how you employ that superpower. Do you use it only in service to yourself, or do you use it in service to others as well? That's the real question you need to think about. Among the people sitting in this room now are leaders who will impact the lives of those 2 children and millions like them. There they are. We can show them again. Okay? And millions of other children around the planet. And you'll do that through a variety of ways, by making policies that govern how they live their lives, by making advances in knowledge that will impact their education, by developments of new technologies that they will be immersed in and will impact how they actually live their lives, through the writing of books and stories that capture their imagination and influence their thinking, and perhaps even by improving human health that will extend the amount of time they have. You carry that on as part of a legacy, and that legacy was started over 100 years ago. You see, Jane and Leland Stanford founded this university over a century ago in memory of their son, Leland Jr., who died when he was 15. His time was too short. Their decision to start the institution began with just a simple premise. If they could no longer do anything for their own son, then they would do something for the children of California. In the intervening years, that has turned into the children of the world. You, sitting here now. You need to think about the fact that you come from that legacy. And in being at this institution over the years, I've taught hundreds of you, literally hundreds of you. I should check to see if the fire marshal's here. In the various classes that I've had, I know what you're capable of. In a variety of ways, I know what you're capable of, but I really know what you're capable of. You have the brains, the motivation, the creativity, and the burden of rising to the challenges of your time to make the world a better place, to help other people's children. Don't wait that expecting someone else is going to take care of this problem or solve it for you. You're the ones that need to do it. But I've seen what you can do, and you give me a tremendous amount of hope for the future. Just remember, when you leave here with 3 things, really. You leave with a superpower, the time to use it, and a choice for how you will employ your superpower. This is your time to change the world. Make the most of it. The anthropologist Margaret Mead summed it up far better than I ever could when she said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And one more thing, when you're out there dreaming big and changing the world, don't forget to have a little fun doing it. So graduates, of the class of 2013, thank you very much for the honor and for sharing some of your time with me this morning. Congratulations, good luck to you all, and may the force be with you, always.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.